The hairpin jabbed into her scalp for the third time, and Lady Catherine Winters bit back a very unladylike curse. "Hold still, miss," her lady's maid pleaded, wrestling with another section of Catherine's unruly chestnut hair. "If you keep moving, it's going to look even worse." "Worse than it already does?" Catherine asked, eyeing her reflection with growing horror. Her normally glossy waves had been tortured into an elaborate style her mother had insisted upon, complete with far too many curls piled atop her head, ribbon woven through in a shade of pink that clashed spectacularly with her complexion, and what appeared to be several small feathers tucked into the arrangement. She looked like a demented peacock had nested on her head. "Your mother specifically requested this style," Mary said apologetically, securing another pin. "She saw it in that French fashion plate and thought it would be perfect for impressing her guest this afternoon." Catherine's heart sank. Her mother's guest, the mysterious visitor who had prompted 3 days of frantic preparation, cook threatening to quit twice, and the entire household turned upside down. Her mother, the Countess of Ashworth, had been unbearably secretive about the identity of this afternoon's caller, saying only that it was someone of great importance and that Catherine must look her absolute best. Hence the hair catastrophe currently happening atop her head. "I look ridiculous," Catherine said flatly, watching another curl spring free despite Mary's best efforts. "I look like I lost a fight with a particularly aggressive milliner." "You look fashionable," Mary lied, though even she didn't sound convinced. "Very French." "Very French and very awful are not mutually exclusive," Catherine sighed. "But I suppose if it makes Mother happy, I can endure looking like a fool for one afternoon. Though I do wonder who could possibly be important enough to warrant this torture." She had her suspicions, of course. Her mother had been not so subtly hinting for months that it was time Catherine considered marriage. At 24, she was firmly on the shelf by society's standards, having turned down 3 perfectly respectable proposals in the past 2 years. But Catherine had her reasons for refusing. Reasons that had everything to do with a certain duke who had left for the continent 3 years ago and taken her heart with him. Alexander Thornton, the Duke of Greystone, had been her brother's closest friend since university. Catherine had known him for years, had grown up trailing after him and William like a devoted puppy, had endured his teasing and his kindness in equal measure, and somewhere along the way she had fallen hopelessly, irrevocably in love with him. Not that he'd ever noticed. To Alexander, she was simply William's little sister. Sweet, bookish Catherine who could discuss philosophy and politics, but who would never be the sophisticated, elegant duchess a man like him would eventually need. Then 3 years ago, he'd left for an extended tour of Europe. "Business matters," he'd said. "Important diplomatic connections to establish." He'd be gone perhaps a year. That had been 3 years ago. 3 years of letters that grew increasingly infrequent. 3 years of hearing about him through William's correspondence, learning about his triumphs in Vienna, his successes in Paris, the rumors of beautiful women and glittering society. 3 years of trying to forget him and failing spectacularly at it. "There," Mary said, stepping back with an expression that suggested she'd done her best with impossible materials. "All finished, miss." Catherine looked at her reflection and barely suppressed a groan. The hairstyle was even worse than she'd feared. The curls were lopsided, the ribbon garish, the feathers listing to one side like a ship taking on water. Combined with the overly fussy pink dress her mother had insisted she wear, she looked like a confection that had been left too long in the sun. "I look like a deranged shepherdess," she said. "You look lovely," Mary insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Catherine?" Her mother's voice carried through the wood, bright with barely contained excitement. "Our guest has arrived. Come down to the drawing room immediately." Catherine took one last despairing look at her reflection, squared her shoulders, and headed for the door. Whoever this mysterious guest was, she could only hope they had a sense of humor about catastrophic hairstyles. She descended the stairs carefully, one hand on the banister to keep her balance. The ridiculous pile of curls felt precarious, threatening to topple at any moment. Through the drawing room door she could hear her mother's animated conversation, her bright laugh that she reserved for important people. Catherine paused outside the door, took a deep breath, and entered. The man standing by the window turned at her entrance, and Catherine's world tilted on its axis. Alexander Thornton stood in her mother's drawing room, tall and devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored coat, his dark hair slightly longer than she remembered, his blue eyes, those eyes that haunted her dreams, widening as they took in her appearance. For one endless, agonizing moment, they simply stared at each other. Catherine felt heat flood her face as she watched his gaze travel from her disastrous hair to her awful pink dress and back again. She saw surprise flash across his features, followed by something that might have been amusement, or possibly horror, or perhaps both. "Catherine," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered it, deep and warm, and capable of turning her insides to liquid. "You're—" He trailed off, clearly at a loss for words. Catherine couldn't blame him. She looked like a disaster. The woman he probably remembered as sensibly dressed and neatly coiffed now stood before him, looking like a fashion emergency had exploded on her head. "Different," she supplied, lifting her chin with as much dignity as she could muster. "Yes, I'm aware. It's the latest French style, apparently, though I suspect the French would disown it if they saw what we've done to it." His lips twitched, actually twitched, as if he was fighting not to smile. Catherine felt something crack in her chest. 3 years. 3 years of missing him, of comparing every other man to him and finding them wanting, of carefully guarding her heart against hope. And he was here, in her drawing room, looking at her ridiculous hair and trying not to laugh. "Alexander," her mother said, oblivious to the tension crackling between them, "I'm so glad you could join us. Catherine, His Grace has just returned from the continent. Isn't that wonderful?" "Wonderful," Catherine echoed faintly. Her mother had done this deliberately, had somehow arranged for Alexander to visit without warning her, had insisted on the awful hairstyle, knowing that Catherine would want to look her best. It was sabotage of the highest order, and Catherine had no idea if it was malicious or misguided or something else entirely. "You look," Alexander began, then seemed to reconsider. "It's good to see you, Catherine. It's been far too long." 3 years, Catherine said, and was proud that her voice remained steady. "You've been gone 3 years, Your Grace." Something flickered in his eyes at her use of his title. They'd always been on first-name terms before, their childhood friendship and her brother's close relationship with him making formality unnecessary. But 3 years changed things. 3 years created distance that even old friendship couldn't immediately bridge. "Please sit," her mother said, gesturing to the arrangement of chairs she'd carefully positioned to force proximity. "I'll have tea brought in. You two must have so much to catch up on. Before we continue, dear listener, tell me, where are you listening to us right now? From the kitchen while preparing lunch? From the living room, taking a well-deserved break? Or perhaps from the bedroom, relaxing after a long day? Leave it in the comments. We love knowing you're here with us. And if you're enjoying this story, if the romance is touching your heart, please tap the like button right below. It helps us so much to continue bringing beautiful stories like this to you. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. We have a new exciting story every week, waiting for you. Now, let's return to our story, because you will not believe what happens next. Catherine sat in the chair her mother indicated, acutely aware of Alexander taking the seat directly across from her, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, the slight shadow along his jaw that suggested he'd traveled a long distance today, the way his gaze kept returning to her hair with barely concealed fascination. "So," she said, deciding that if she was going to be mortified, she might as well be mortified with dignity. "What brings you back to England, Your Grace? Surely the glittering salons of Paris and Vienna must seem terribly dull compared to our modest London society." "On the contrary," Alexander said, and was that amusement warming his voice? "I found myself missing English society a great deal, particularly certain aspects of it." "The rain?" Catherine suggested. "The mediocre food? The tendency for everyone to discuss the weather as if it were a matter of national importance?" His lips twitched again. "Among other things." Her mother bustled back in with the tea tray, chattering about the weather, ironically, and some scandal involving Lady Pemberton and a missing necklace. Catherine poured tea with hands that wanted to shake, hyper-aware of Alexander's presence across from her, of the way he accepted his cup with thanks, of the familiar gesture he made when he took a sip. "Catherine has been keeping very busy while you were away," her mother said, and Catherine recognized the tone. It was her mother's matchmaking voice, the one that preceded lengthy recitations of Catherine's accomplishments designed to impress potential suitors. "She's been working with the Foundling Hospital organizing their literacy program, and she's been published. Did you know? 3 essays in the Ladies' Magazine about education reform." "I did know," Alexander said quietly. "William sent me copies. I've read them all." Catherine's head snapped up. "You have?" "Several times. Your argument for extending education to working-class girls was particularly compelling. I found myself discussing it with several members of Parliament during my time abroad. You've caused quite a stir in certain circles. Catherine stared at him. He'd read her essays, had discussed them with parliamentarians, had thought about her work while he was thousands of miles away, living his sophisticated life in European capitals. "Oh," she said inadequately. Then, recovering slightly, "I'm surprised you had time for such things, given your busy social calendar." William's letters were full of accounts of your various conquests. Vienna, Paris, Rome. It sounds as though you've been very popular. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. William has a tendency to exaggerate. My time abroad was primarily focused on business matters and diplomatic relations. Naturally, Catherine said, and couldn't quite keep the edge from her voice. Though I'm sure the numerous beautiful women mentioned in his letters were purely diplomatic necessities as well. "Catherine," her mother said, her tone holding a warning. But Alexander was looking at Catherine with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There were social obligations," he said carefully, "but nothing that is, I never—" He seemed to struggle for words, which was unusual for him. Alexander Thornton was known for his eloquence, his ability to navigate even the most delicate diplomatic situations with perfect phrasing. Now he sat across from her, looking uncharacteristically flustered, and Catherine felt a small, traitorous flutter of hope in her chest. "Your Grace," she said, keeping her voice light despite the sudden rapid beating of her heart, "you needn't explain your social life to me. We're friends, are we not? Or at least we were. I'm sure you had a wonderful time abroad, and I'm pleased for your success." "Friends?" he repeated, and there was something odd in his tone, almost bitter. "Yes, of course, friends." An awkward silence fell. Catherine's mother looked between them with an expression of barely concealed calculation, clearly trying to determine if her scheme was working or backfiring spectacularly. "Perhaps," Alexander said, setting down his teacup with careful precision, "Catherine and I might take a turn in the garden? If that would be acceptable, Lady Ashworth. I'd like to hear more about her work with the Foundling Hospital." "Of course," Catherine's mother said quickly. "What a lovely idea. The garden is beautiful this time of year. Catherine, why don't you show His Grace the new rose arbor your father had installed?" Catherine wanted to refuse, wanted to flee to her room, tear the ridiculous curls from her hair, and hide under her covers until Alexander left England again. But pride, that same stubborn pride that had sustained her through 3 years of missing him, made her stand and offer a brittle smile. "I'd be delighted," she lied. They walked in silence through the French doors and into the garden, maintaining a careful distance between them. The afternoon sun was warm, birds singing in the trees, roses blooming in riot of color. It should have been romantic. Instead, Catherine felt as though she were walking to her execution, each step taking her closer to some inevitable disaster. "Your hair," Alexander said suddenly, and Catherine closed her eyes in mortification. "It's very elaborate." "It's horrible," Catherine corrected. "You don't need to be polite. I know it's a disaster. My mother insisted on this French style for your visit, and I look like several small animals died on my head and were arranged in an aesthetically displeasing manner." A sound escaped him, something between a cough and a laugh. "It's not that bad," he said, but his voice shook with suppressed amusement. "It's worse," Catherine assured him. "The ribbons don't match my dress, the curls are lopsided, and I'm fairly certain one of the feathers is about to stage an escape. You have my permission to laugh. Everyone else will the moment I leave the house." "I'm not laughing at you," Alexander said, though his lips were definitely twitching now. When I imagined seeing you again, I admit I didn't quite picture this." Catherine stopped walking and turned to face him. "You imagined seeing me again?" He went still. That is." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from years ago when he was frustrated or nervous. "Of course I did. You're William's sister, my friend. I naturally assumed we'd see each other when I returned." "Naturally," Catherine echoed, something deflating in her chest. Friend, William's sister. That's all she'd ever been to him. That's all she'd ever be. "Catherine," Alexander said, and his voice had gone soft. "Careful. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said 3 years ago before I left." Her heart stopped. "Yes?" He took a step closer, then another, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, that familiar scent of sandalwood and something else uniquely him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "When I left for Europe," he said quietly, I was running away. From what? From you. The world seemed to hold its breath. Catherine stared up at him, certain she'd misheard. From me? From what I felt for you. From the fact that every time I looked at you, I wanted things I had no right to want. You were William's little sister, my friend's family, off limits in every possible way. So I ran. I told myself it was business, diplomatic necessity, important connections. But the truth was, I couldn't trust myself around you anymore. Couldn't trust that I wouldn't do something stupid, like tell you I'd been in love with you since you were 20 years old, and argued with me about Wordsworth for 3 hours straight. Catherine couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at him while his words rearranged everything she thought she knew about the past 3 years. You were in love with me, she whispered. Am, he corrected. Present tense. Catherine, I spent 3 years in Europe trying to forget you, trying to convince myself that what I felt was just foolish infatuation, that distance and time would cure it. Instead, every woman I met paled in comparison. Every conversation felt shallow because it wasn't with you. Every success felt hollow because I couldn't share it with you. But you never said anything, never gave any indication. Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself you couldn't possibly feel the same way. You were so brilliant, so passionate about your causes. You could have had any man in England. Why would you want a duke who was too afraid to admit his feelings? Because, Catherine said, her voice shaking, that duke was the only man I've ever wanted, the only man I've ever loved. Do you have any idea how many nights I've spent staring at your letters to William, reading them over and over, looking for some sign that you missed me even a fraction as much as I missed you? Alexander's eyes widened. You love me? Of course I love you, you impossible man. I've loved you for years. Why do you think I turned down 3 proposals? Why do you think I couldn't bring myself to care about any other suitor? Because none of them were you. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Alexander started to laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, joyful sound that made Catherine's heart soar even as confusion swept through her. What's so funny? She demanded. We're idiots, he said, still laughing. Complete idiots. We've wasted 3 years being noble and stupid when we could have been together. I'm not an idiot, Catherine protested. You're the one who ran away to Europe. You're right. I'm the idiot. He stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. Can you forgive me? For being too afraid to tell you the truth? For wasting 3 years we could have spent together? That depends, Catherine said, trying to sound stern despite the smile tugging at her lips. Are you going to run away again the next time you're frightened? No, he said firmly. Never again. From now on, the only running I'll do is toward you, not away. Good. Though I must warn you, you're getting the worse end of this bargain. You're declaring your love to a woman who looks like a tragic experiment in hairstyling. You look beautiful, Alexander said, and he sounded completely sincere. I look like a catastrophe. You look like Catherine, my Catherine. The woman I've loved for years who could wear a burlap sack and still be the most captivating person in any room. Though I admit, his lips twitched again. The hair is rather spectacular, in a chaotic sort of way. You're terrible at compliments. I'm terrible at a lot of things, apparently, including recognizing when the woman I love has loved me back all along. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently removed one of the listing feathers from her hair. Though I have to ask, what possessed your mother to insist on this particular style? She knew you were coming, Catherine admitted. She arranged this entire visit as a surprise. I think she was trying to help, in her own misguided way. She's been worried about me, about the fact that I've turned down every proposal. I think she hoped seeing you again might, I don't know, shake something loose. It certainly did that. Alexander removed another feather, then another, letting them fall to the garden path, though perhaps not in the way she expected. What are you doing? Catherine asked, but she didn't stop him. Rescuing you from this avian assault. His fingers worked gently, removing pins and ribbons with surprising dexterity. That's better. Now I can see your face properly without all this decoration. Catherine felt her carefully constructed hairstyle collapsing, her natural waves beginning to escape. I'm going to look even worse now. My mother spent 2 hours on that. You look perfect, Alexander said, and the warmth in his voice made her heart skip. This is how I've always pictured you, not all done up like a French fashion plate, but real. Catherine. And you, dear listener, what would you do in Catherine's place? Have you lived through something similar? Do you know someone who went through a situation like this? Tell your story in the comments. We read each one with affection and love knowing your experiences. And if this story is making you sigh, smile, or even shed a tear, share it with someone special. Think of that friend, sister, or daughter who would also love this journey. Send her the link. Love is meant to be shared, isn't it? But let's return, because what is about to happen will leave you speechless. Catherine's hair was falling completely now, waves tumbling around her shoulders in the way she normally wore it when alone, without society's constraints. She should have been mortified, should have been concerned about what her mother would say, about what the servants would think if they saw her disheveled state. Instead, she found herself laughing. "You're destroying 2 hours of my maid's hard work." "I'm improving upon it," Alexander corrected, removing the last of the offensive ribbons. "There, much better, though you're still wearing this unfortunate dress." "Don't start on the dress. I'm already aware of its many shortcomings. It's pink, very pink, aggressively pink. My mother chose it specifically to be flattering. It's the wrong shade for your complexion entirely. You should wear jewel tones, deep emeralds, sapphires, colors that complement your eyes rather than clash with them." Catherine blinked at him. "You've thought about what colors I should wear?" "I've thought about rather a lot concerning you over the past 3 years. He smiled, and it was soft and slightly self-deprecating. "An embarrassing amount, actually. William would mock me mercilessly if he knew the number of times I steered conversations toward you just to hear news of you. He never mentioned it in his letters, because I was subtle about it, or at least I thought I was. Looking back, I was probably absurdly transparent, but William is oblivious about these things. My brother is oblivious about most things," Catherine agreed. "He once failed to notice that Miss Hartwell was desperately in love with him for an entire season." In his defense, Miss Hartwell's approach was rather indirect. She followed him everywhere. "Well, yes, but she never actually told him." "Neither did you," Catherine pointed out. "For 3 years. Alexander winced. "Fair point, though in my defense I was terrified." "Of me? I'm the least terrifying person imaginable. Not of you, of myself, of how completely you'd captured my heart without even trying, of how much power you had to hurt me if you didn't feel the same way. So I ran away and convinced myself I was being noble, protecting your friendship with William, maintaining propriety, when really I was just afraid." Catherine's expression softened. "I was afraid too, afraid that you saw me as nothing more than William's little sister, that any feelings I had would be unwelcome and embarrassing, so I never said anything either." "We really are quite the pair of cowards," Alexander said. "Reformed cowards," Catherine corrected, "because I'm done being afraid, and I'm done waiting for someday or maybe." "Alexander Thornton, I love you. I've loved you for years, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." His smile was brilliant. "Catherine Winters, I love you too, desperately, completely, and with absolutely no sense of self-preservation, and I'm done running away from it." "Good," Catherine said, "because if you try to flee to Europe again, I'm coming with you, catastrophic hairstyle and all. I wouldn't dream of leaving you behind, though I'd insist on choosing your traveling wardrobe. That dress truly is offensive. Stop insulting my dress." "I'm not insulting it. I'm simply stating objective facts. It's the wrong color, the wrong cut, and those bows are positioned in a way that defies both logic and aesthetics. You're terrible. I'm honest. There's a difference." Catherine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in 3 years. "So what happens now? Do we go back inside and inform my mother that her scheme worked?" "Eventually," Alexander said. "But first," he cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, his eyes searching hers for permission. "May I kiss you? I've been wanting to for approximately 4 years, and I think I've waited long enough." 4 years. Catherine's breath caught. "You've wanted to kiss me since I was 20? Since you were 20 and destroyed Lord Pemberton's argument about women's education so thoroughly that he stormed out of your brother's dinner party in a rage. You were magnificent. I've wanted to kiss you ever since." "Then yes," Catherine whispered. "Kiss me, before I wake up and discover this is all a dream brought on by too much time in the sun with ridiculous hair." His kiss was everything she'd imagined in 3 years of dreaming and more. Soft at first, almost questioning, then deeper as she rose on her toes to meet him. His hands tangled in her now loose hair, and she gripped the front of his coat, anchoring herself against the dizzying sensation of finally having what she'd wanted for so long. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I should speak with your father. That's very proper of you. I'm a duke. Propriety is expected." He paused. Though I've just thoroughly compromised you in your mother's garden, so perhaps I'm not as proper as I should be. We're engaged now anyway, aren't we? You can't kiss me like that and then disappear to Europe again. I won't allow it. Engaged, Alexander repeated, and his smile was soft. Yes, if you'll have me. Catherine Winters, will you marry me? Will you take this reformed coward who was too afraid to admit he loved you and possibly make him into someone worthy of your brilliance? You're already worthy, Catherine said. But yes, I'll marry you, though I have some conditions. Name them. First, I get to continue my work with the Foundling Hospital and my writing. I won't be a duchess who simply hosts parties and looks decorative. Agreed. In fact, I insist on it. Your work is too important to abandon. Plus, I rather enjoy your essays. They make me think. Second, you have to promise never to run away again. If something frightens you, you talk to me about it. No more fleeing to foreign countries to avoid your feelings. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to travel for legitimate diplomatic reasons. As long as you come with me, I think I can live with that. Catherine smiled. Third, you have to tell William. Yourself. I'm not facing my brother's reaction alone. Alexander paled slightly. Ah, yes. William. Your very large, very protective brother who once threatened to thrash a man for looking at you sideways at a ball. That very one. Though in fairness, Lord Hartley was being quite inappropriate. William is going to kill me. He's going to find out I've been in love with his sister for years, and he's going to absolutely murder me. Probably, Catherine agreed cheerfully. But you'll be dead while engaged to me, so at least you'll die happy. That's not as comforting as you seem to think it is. They walked back toward the house hand in hand, Catherine's hair loose around her shoulders, her awful pink dress somehow less offensive now that she was deliriously happy. Her mother met them at the door, took one look at their joined hands and Catherine's disheveled state, and burst into tears of joy. Finally, she sobbed. Do you know how long I've been waiting for you two to figure this out? I've been dropping hints for years. Years? And you've both been so obtuse. You knew? Catherine asked, shocked. Of course I knew. A mother knows these things. Why do you think I insisted on that horrible hairstyle? I knew Alexander wouldn't care what you looked like. I knew he'd see you and realize what he'd been missing. Though I admit, I didn't expect him to dismantle your hair in the garden. It was an improvement, Alexander said, unrepentant. Well, clearly something worked, her mother said, dabbing at her eyes. Now come inside. We need to discuss wedding plans. And someone needs to inform your father, Catherine, before he hears it from the servants. And we should probably send word to William. I'll tell William, Alexander said, though he looked distinctly uncomfortable about the prospect. It's the right thing to do. Face him like a man. Accept whatever thrashing he deems appropriate for daring to love his sister. He won't actually thrash you, Catherine said. Probably. He might threaten it, but I don't think he'll follow through. How reassuring. They spent the rest of the afternoon in a whirl of congratulations and champagne, and Catherine's father's gruff approval and her mother's tearful plans. Through it all, Alexander stayed close, his hand finding hers, his eyes warm whenever they met hers. As evening fell and it came time for Alexander to leave, he pulled Catherine aside in the hallway. I meant what I said earlier. I love you, catastrophic hair and all. It's not catastrophic anymore. You destroyed all my mother's hard work, remember? Improved upon it, he corrected. Though I admit you do look better with your natural waves. More like yourself, less like a very confused peacock. You're never going to let me forget that disaster, are you? Never. I plan to tell our grandchildren about the day I returned from Europe and found the woman I loved dressed as a demented shepherdess. You're terrible. I'm yours, he corrected, which I think makes you equally terrible for agreeing to marry me. We're terrible together, then. I can live with that. He kissed her again, soft and sweet, a promise of more to come. I'll call on you tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until we're married. If you'll allow it, I'll allow it, though you still have to face William eventually. Tomorrow, Alexander said with a theatrical shudder. I'll tackle that particular dragon tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to savor the fact that you're mine and I'm yours, and we've both stopped being idiots long enough to admit it. Fair enough, Catherine agreed. Though when William does find out, I expect you to defend me. I won't have him blaming me for corrupting his innocent friend. You did corrupt me, thoroughly, with your brilliant mind and your passionate arguments and your complete disregard for society's expectations. I was a respectable duke before I met you. Now look at me, dismantling hairstyles in gardens, professing my love to my best friend's sister. Planning to marry a woman who writes controversial essays about education reform. I'm absolutely ruined. Good, Catherine said, rising on her toes to kiss him once more. I like you ruined. We're almost reaching the end of this exciting journey. But if you love the romance of Catherine and Alexander, I have wonderful news. We have dozens of other stories waiting for you here on the channel. Breathtaking historical romances, heartwarming second chances, unlikely loves that seem impossible until they happen, each story more exciting than the last. After finishing this one, scroll down and check out our playlists. I'm sure you'll find your next favorite story. And don't forget, activate the notification bell. That way you receive an alert whenever we publish a new story. Because let's be honest, you already know you'll want the next one, right? Now yes, let's get to the moment you were waiting for. The ending your heart asked for. William Winters arrived at his family's London townhouse the next afternoon to find his mother in tears, his father looking suspiciously pleased, and his sister wearing a smile that could have lit the entire city. What's happened? He asked cautiously. Has someone died? Won the lottery? Solved the mystery of why father insists on wearing those hideous waistcoats? Your sister is engaged, his mother announced, crushing him in a hug before he could react. William froze. Engaged? To whom? When did this happen? Why wasn't I consulted? You know I have to approve of anyone courting Catherine. I have standards, requirements, a list of qualifications. To Alexander, Catherine said, appearing in the doorway with that smile still in place. I'm engaged to Alexander. For a moment, William simply stared at her. Then, understanding dawned, followed immediately by disbelief. Alexander Thornton, my best friend Alexander, the Duke of Greystone Alexander. That's the one, the man I've known since university, the man who is currently in my study, looking as though he expects to be executed at any moment. He's here? Catherine's smile faltered slightly. He came to tell you himself? Brave man, their father muttered. Foolish but brave. William looked between his sister's hopeful expression and his parents' amused faces and felt something click into place. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been in love with him? Catherine's cheeks flushed. Years. Since I was 20, I think. Maybe longer. And him? How long has Alexander been in love with you? He says since I was 20, when I argued with Lord Pemberton about women's education. William closed his eyes. That was 4 years ago. Yes, 4 years. My best friend has been in love with my sister for 4 years, and neither of you thought to mention it? We didn't tell each other, Catherine said. He thought I saw him as just your friend. I thought he saw me as just your little sister. We were both too afraid to say anything, so he ran away to Europe for 3 years. He ran away to Europe because he loved you? Essentially, yes. William opened his eyes and stared at his sister. Then, to everyone's surprise, he started to laugh. Good God, we really are all idiots, aren't we? We? Catherine asked cautiously. I've known Alexander was in love with you for at least 2 years. He was about as subtle as a brick through a window. Every letter I received from him managed to include some question about you, some comment about how you were doing, and every letter you sent me asking about him, trying to sound casual while clearly desperate for news. I thought you'd both eventually figure it out. I didn't realize you'd be quite so spectacularly dense about it. You knew? Catherine and her mother said in unison. Of course I knew. I'm not blind, though I admit I didn't expect him to actually do anything about it. Alexander's always been the cautious sort. William headed toward the study. I should probably put him out of his misery. He looked pale enough to faint when he asked to speak with me privately. William, Catherine called after him. Be kind. He really does love me. I know he does. That's why I'm going to let him live. In the study, Alexander stood by the window, his posture rigid with tension. He turned when William entered, and his expression was equal parts determination and dread. William, he began, You want to marry my sister? William interrupted. You've been in love with her for years. You ran away to Europe like a coward because you couldn't handle your feelings. And now you're back, and you've convinced her to take pity on you despite your complete inability to express emotions like a normal person. Have I got all that right? Alexander blinked. Yes. That's remarkably accurate. Good. Here's what's going to happen. William moved to pour them both a drink. You're going to marry Catherine. You're going to make her happy, or I'll thrash you within an inch of your life, Duke or not. You're going to support her work, her writing, her causes, because they're important to her and therefore important to you. And you're never ever going to run away again. Understood? Understood, Alexander said faintly. You're not angry? Angry? I'm relieved. Do you know how many unsuitable suitors I've had to scare off in the past 4 years? How many proposals she's turned down? How many times I've had to watch my brilliant sister pine for an idiot who was too afraid to admit he loved her? William handed Alexander a glass. You're my best friend. Catherine is my sister. I can't think of anyone I'd rather see her marry, as long as you promise not to make her cry. If you make her cry, all bets are off. I'll do everything in my power to make her happy, Alexander said seriously. She's the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I don't deserve her, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her. Good answer. William raised his glass. To you and Catherine. May you have many years of happiness together, and may she never forgive you for that hair disaster at yesterday's tea. Alexander groaned. She told you about that? She told everyone. Mother thought it was hilarious. Father said it showed initiative, and I have to admit, deliberately sabotaging her appearance just to see if you'd still love her regardless is rather brilliant, even if it was unintentional. It wasn't sabotage. Your mother genuinely thought that style was flattering. My mother has many talents. Fashion sense is not among them. William grinned. But it worked, didn't it? You saw Catherine at her worst, and you fell even more in love with her. I saw Catherine being Catherine. Honest and self-deprecating and amusing, even while mortified by her own appearance. How could I not love her? That's exactly the right answer, William said. Welcome to the family, Alexander. Officially this time, instead of just as my friend who's been mooning over my sister for years. The wedding was planned for 2 months hence, which Catherine's mother insisted was barely enough time to do things properly, but which Catherine thought was 2 months too long. She wanted to marry Alexander immediately, wanted to start their life together without delay. But there were arrangements to make, guests to invite, a trousseau to assemble, and Alexander, to her surprise, seemed to enjoy the planning almost as much as her mother did. You need to wear sapphire blue, he informed her during one fitting session, examining fabric samples with a critical eye that would have amused her if it wasn't so endearing. This pale pink makes you look washed out. I'm not wearing sapphire blue to my own wedding, Catherine protested. It's supposed to be white or ivory. Tradition. Tradition is overrated. You should wear colors that complement your complexion and bring out your eyes. Sapphire blue with perhaps some silver embroidery. Something that makes you look like yourself, not like every other bride in England. You have very strong opinions about wedding dresses for someone who will only see me in it for approximately 3 hours before we're married. I have strong opinions about everything concerning you, Alexander corrected. It's one of my more annoying qualities. You should get used to it. I am used to it. You've been dictating my wardrobe choices since you dismantled my hair in the garden. Improving your wardrobe choices, he said. There's a difference. Catherine laughed, and the modiste looked between them with amusement. Perhaps your grace should examine these other samples while the Duke and I discuss options. No need, Catherine said. Show me the sapphire blue. If my future husband feels this strongly about it, I suppose I should at least consider it. The dress, when it was finally completed, was stunning. Deep sapphire blue silk with delicate silver embroidery at the hem and sleeves, fitted to perfection, elegant without being fussy. When Catherine tried it on for the final fitting, even her mother had to admit it was perfect. You were right, she told Alexander later when he came to call. About the dress, about everything really, though I hate giving you the satisfaction of admitting it. I'm always right about you, he said, pulling her close despite the presence of her mother as chaperone. It's my particular talent. Understanding Catherine Winters better than anyone else in the world. Catherine Thornton soon, she corrected. In 6 more days, I'll be the Duchess of Greystone, and I'll be the luckiest man in England. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, as if the universe itself approved of their union. Catherine wore her sapphire blue dress and her natural hair, loosely arranged with small white roses woven through the waves. No ribbons, no feathers, nothing but herself. When she walked down the aisle toward where Alexander waited, she saw his expression transform. Love and wonder and something that looked suspiciously like tears in his eyes. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. Absolutely beautiful. It's the dress, she whispered back. You chose well. It's you. It's always been you. The ceremony was traditional, the vows spoken clearly despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm them both. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Alexander kissed her for the first time as her husband, Catherine felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. At the wedding breakfast, William gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying in turns. "To my sister and my best friend," he said, raising his glass, "who spent 4 years being absolutely obtuse about their feelings for each other, who needed a catastrophic hairstyle to finally admit what everyone else already knew, and who will, I'm certain, spend the rest of their lives being ridiculously happy together while arguing about fashion choices and education reform and everything in between. To happiness," the guests echoed, and Catherine felt Alexander's hand find hers under the table, squeezing gently. Their wedding night was spent at Alexander's estate in the country, away from the bustle of London. They stood together on the terrace, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight, and Catherine leaned back against her husband's chest. "Do you remember," Alexander said softly, "when you were 20 and I was 27, and we argued about Wordsworth for 3 hours straight? I remember thinking you were completely wrong about his interpretation of nature as spiritual experience. You were very passionate about it, very determined to make me see your point of view. Did I succeed?" "Completely. Though I'd already been half in love with you before that conversation. Watching you defend your position with such intelligence and fire, I was lost. I think I knew then that no other woman would ever compare." Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "Why did you wait so long? Why did you run away instead of telling me?" "Because I was afraid," Alexander admitted. "Afraid you'd reject me. Afraid I'd ruin my friendship with William. Afraid I'd make a fool of myself. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to find the right words. So I ran, and I told myself I was being noble, when really I was just being a coward. You came back," Catherine said. "That's what matters. You came back, and you told me the truth, and now we're here." "Now we're here," he agreed. "Married, together, finally, finally," Catherine echoed, and kissed him. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Catherine would always smile and tell them about the worst hairstyle in the history of England, about ribbons and feathers and elaborate curls that made her look like a demented peacock, about a duke who came home from Europe and saw her at her absolute worst and fell even more in love with her. And Alexander would add that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as disasters, that love doesn't care about perfect appearances or proper timing, that sometimes you have to be willing to look like a fool to find the person who sees past the surface to the truth beneath. Their eldest daughter, hearing this story for the 10th time, would roll her eyes and say, "But mother, you must have looked truly awful." And Catherine would laugh and agree that yes, she had looked spectacularly terrible, but it had been worth it. Every moment of mortification, because it had led her to this, to Alexander, to their children, to a life filled with love and laughter and the occasional argument about fashion choices. "Though your father did destroy 2 hours of my maid's hard work," she would add, "I'm still not entirely over that. It was an improvement," Alexander would insist, just as he had 20 years before. It was vandalism. It was love. And really, Catherine thought, that said everything that needed to be said. And so ends the story of Catherine and Alexander. A journey about love hiding behind fear, about having the courage to be seen at your worst by the person who matters most, about recognizing that true love doesn't need perfect appearances or elaborate hairstyles, just honest hearts and the bravery to finally speak the truth. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it touched mine bringing it to you. If it moved you, if you sighed, if you smiled along with our characters, leave your like. It motivates us to continue. And tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment? What touched you most? We want to know. Each comment is read with affection. Are you missing it already? Don't worry. We have a new story coming very soon. Subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss it. And while you wait, explore our channel. We have so many other beautiful stories waiting for you. Thank you so much for your company, for choosing to spend this time with us, for opening your heart to one more love story. Until the next journey, dear listener. May your heart always be open to love, to hope, and to the good moments life reserves for us. A warm hug, and see you soon.